Hi sewing friends, my name is Karina and this is Lifting Pins and Needles, a channel all about sewing, limitless sewing, and today I have two beautiful woven blouses to share with you. This is a brand new pattern from Itch to Stitch and the name of the pattern is called Galicia. Now if you're from Spain and you speak the proper Spanish, you would pronounce it like that, sort of with a Z type of sound, Galicia. I'm from South America and here we say it Galicia, so that's how it sounds more natural to me. I'm glad I can pronounce a name for once. You can see the liner here that the features are really beautiful. There is a round neckline and on the pattern it's called a neckband. Below that round neckline, which is not too high, not too low, you have gathers on the raglan sleeves here on the top and all along the front neckline. On the back you don't have gathers and you can see that there's a button placket on the back, which I think is really cute. The raglan sleeves can be either 3/4 or long. They all have a little vent at the back of the sleeve that is finished with a lapped binding technique, which I love. A little cuff, really delicate, it's not too wide. The volume at the bottom of the sleeve is a little extra, so it's actually gathered into the cuff, which I find is always a really pretty feature. The hem is curved, and then the best thing that there is in this pattern are the optional waist darts. They're fisheye darts, both in the front and the back. You can sew them or you can just sew your blouse without them. If I see darts there, I'm mega happy because I'm frequently adding darts to garments. So if they are already there, why not sew them up? I think it's a bonus and it's going to make the blouse fit so much better. It just depends if you like your blouse to be a little bit more shaped or you like it a little bit more loose. In any case, the fit is comfortable. You don't have a lot of positive ease here. It's not fitted either. I think it's just right. Because the Galicia top is a brand new pattern from Itch to Stitch, it's 20% off during the first week. It's release week. In this video, I'm going to show you how to sew the neckline, which might be one of the aspects that you might find a little bit more intriguing, a little bit more fiddly. You'll be able to do it for sure when you follow along. I will leave you my affiliate link down below if you'd like to use it. If you buy your patterns using my link, I get a small commission back and that supports the work that I do here on YouTube. One of the ways I make an income from doing all of this content for you that you can watch for free. And you need nice flowy fabrics in my opinion. I have a little graphic here for you to see. I tend to class them as structured or flowy. You can actually find really lightweight fabrics that are almost sheer, but they have no drape at all. In my stash I have a few cotton lawns that I just have a hard time using because of the fact that they don't have any drape. And when you have features like gathers around the neckline, I prefer the fabric to be a little bit more flowy and less voluminous. So I would always prefer rayon linen blends, crepe, silk, that type of fabric. Even tencel would be nice. But if you're all into linen and all that, it's up to you. You know, you're the one that chooses what fabrics to use. I'm just stating my opinion. And basically for any design that has gathers, I would stay to the flowy ones because then the gathers fall closer to the body and not away from the body. I've made two blouses. One is a solid, believe it or not, I have actually taken a solid out of my stash and sewed it up. And it is a rayon linen blend. I'd say it's light to medium weight. It's very drapey, beautiful. The amount of linen in this blend is very small. I think it's 14 or 16%. The rest is just rayon. So it gives you that nice texture and look of linen, but then all the flowiness and drapiness that the rayon has. So I love that and it's just interesting to look at. Whenever I sew a solid, I just can't take a fabric that is just plain, that has no texture on it. I need it to have some texture. And that's why this fabric is really good. Also, it wasn't that hard to manipulate or sew with as 100% rayon that is lighter weight. Wasn't too slippery, was okay. The second fabric is a precious fabric that I've hoarded for over a decade. I've been lugging around from New Zealand to Bolivia, from Bolivia to Brazil. It's finally made up into a blouse. Now it's only a meter. I don't know why back then I was buying only a meter of fabric, which is just over a yard. I don't know, but I did what I had to do to make it work. You'll see later. But it's precious, and I'm so happy I got it made finally. I'd taken it out and put it on my table, put pattern pieces on top, and I thought, no, I'd done that about 1,000 times with that fabric. But this time it stuck and I got it made. You do also need some lightweight interfacing. These neckband pieces have two layers, an outer layer and the inner layer. The layer that you see on the outside is the one that's interfaced. You know, I like to block views all my pieces. Standard practice for me, and I've done that there. You also have cuffs that need to be interfaced. So you don't need a large amount, but you do need some. You'll need about 9 to 10 buttons. 7/8 of an inch, 7 at the back and then 1 here and 1 there. In my case, I actually put 8 at the back. I needed an extra one. You'll find sizes from 00 to 40 US. That goes up to a 62-inch hip. You also find cup sizes. That is a feature that is greatly appreciated by myself, and I know by many of you. From each stitch, every woven pattern will have them. Cups A through double D. Remember, these are sewing cup sizes. They take into account the projection the bust has from the body. Different to bra cups, where you're actually cupping the bust from underneath. So you measure your under bust and your full bust difference. Totally different thing. Don't think they are the same. Just measure yourself. You'll find a chart there that shows you what sewing cup size you are. I'm a C cup. When you look at body measurements and finished garment measurements, you can see the difference, and I always do that. It's an exercise that is 100% done with every single project. I write it down because I need to know, and then I share it with you. Positive Ease at the bust, which is a nice amount of positive ease. It's not super boxy, it's not super loose, but it's not tight either. At the waist, you have 8 inches. If you sew all these waist darts, I measured, they're about an inch wide at the widest part of that. So then you'd have 4 inches of positive ease if you sew the darts, which is welcome. I love that. Love the waist shaping. So why not sew the darts if that's something that you like? And at the hips, you have 4.5, 5 inches of positive ease also. So it's really nice. I love that amount of ease. Excellent. As for personal fitting, if you are newer to sewing, I would suggest you make a muslin. In this case, this type of design is relatively easier to fit because you don't have side bust darts. All the volume for the bust comes from the neckline down. That's where you have all the gathers there. So it could be easier to fit. Now, if you are a shorter person or a taller person and you regularly need to do length adjustments, I think the muslin might help you there to determine that the notches on the waist are actually at the waist, because that can throw off your fit in so many ways. Especially if you want to sew the darts, because the widest part of the dart matches that waist notch on the side, so it does need to match your waist. In my case, because I know this blog and I've sewn like 100 patterns already, I know that even though I'm taller, I'm short-waisted and the bodice length usually fits me really well with each to stitch, so I didn't make a muslin at all. What I did though is leave the waist darts to be sewn to the very, very end of the blouse. So in the pattern instructions, you'll find them quite at the start of the process. I just traced them. I had them marked on my fabric, made sure that those marks were gonna last. And after I'd sewn the blouse, even the hem, the buttons, everything, then I basted by hand those darts, tried it on to see if I needed any adjustments. So personal fitting adjustments, I added an inch. You have 2 shorten and lengthen lines on the pattern, which is great because we might need to add or take away length in different areas. You know, if you're making substantial adjustments, it's always best to do them in 2 sections so that you don't deform your pattern pieces. So you'll find those lines on the sleeve, on the front, on the back, so you can adjust. I added an inch at the bottom. I added an inch on the lower shorten and lengthen line there for the front and the back. And I also added an inch to the sleeves. I had the sneaky suspicion that the front waist dart might be a little too high up here, like too close to the apex. So I basted it by hand, tried it on, and for sure it was a little high. So all I did was lower the tip there of the fisheye dart by 3/8, and that was a little further away from the apex and a little bit more comfortable, a better fit for me. And that was actually all the customization I needed to do to these darts. Then when I went to sew my second blouse, then I just sewed the darts at the start because I already knew they fit me and I'd already adjusted. When you look at the liner and you see that back button placket, you might think, oh wow, that looks really complex. But actually that button placket is integrated to the back piece, so it's not a separate piece that you need to sew on. 2 folds that you do, and because you do 2 largish folds at that area, you end up with 3 layers of fabric, which will replace interfacing. So you don't need to interface that area. You just need to mark the lines on the pattern, fold in once, fold in again, and then top stitch, and done. That is your button placket, which is really great. You're using 1/2 inch seam allowance for everything. I filmed the full step-by-step sew along from beginning to end for Patreon, and I'm sharing with you a summary. So what you'll see is how to sew this neckline. Before that, you would have done your button placket. You have 2 back pieces and a front. Your raglan sleeves sewn onto there. You have a lot of fabric all together. The side seams are sewn towards the very end. It's similar to when you sew in sleeves on the flat with knits. This is a raglan sleeve, so that comes way later when you sew the seam of the sleeve and the side seam. So we're going to start seeing this where we are assembling the neckband pieces. Little seams on the side, 2 layers, outer, inner. There are lots of gathers here around the raglan sleeves and the neckline. We're going to see how to put all of this together with awesome results. Stitch in the ditch, a bit of hand basting of course. Let's see.
You think this is starting to wear on me? You've been raining down like hail. I'm weak.
There are 7 pattern pieces to the Galicia blouse, so it's not that many. This is the front and it's cut on the fold right there. That is the raglan type of armhole, side seam, and this is the back piece. The back piece looks wider and it's because the center back is going to be folded twice to get the button placket there, so you don't actually need to put interfacing because the folds of fabric will give it the structure it needs. These black pieces are the neckband pieces. These are for the back. There's 2 pairs, 2 that are interfaced, and under that one are the non-interfaced ones. Same as for the front. These front neckband pieces are also cut on the fold, and there's an interface and a non-interface side. This is the raglan sleeve. I have a long sleeve version, but you can also make it 3/4. 2 cuff pieces, they are both interfaced, and here is the little binding piece that will go on the continuous lap that will be found right here, the little slit that you bind. This little opening will always be on the back part of the sleeve, so if you look up you'll find the double notches right there. There will be gathers on the neckline and also on the top of the raglan sleeve. This is the front neckline and it looks quite wide. It's because it's going to be gathered. So what we're doing at this stage is just gathering stitches. We're not going to be doing the actual gathers. On this front neckline, we're going to sew from the edge where we have the seam or across to the other edge where the other raglan seam starts. And we're going to do 2 rows. I'm going to be doing my first row at slightly over 1/4, not exactly 1/4, but a bit smaller than 3/8, and then the second row at 5/8. Then my 1/2 inch seam allowance will be right in between the 2 rows. Make sure you stop right before that seam there, don't catch it. And now the second one is at 5/8. So that is the space between my rows. Now we do the exact same thing with the top of the raglan sleeve right here. 2 rows again, making sure to move the seam allowance out of the way so we don't catch it, and I'll be using the same distance as I did before. And then we repeat the same thing with the other raglan sleeve on the top. We're not gathering yet. We're going to set this aside and now work on the neckbands. Okay, here are the neckband pieces. These are the interfaced ones. These will be on the outside and the non-interfaced ones will be on the inside. The front was cut on the forward and it's quite round like that. And then we have 2 back pieces. Let's take these and put them right sides together right there, and we're going to sew these seams there, and the same thing with the non-interface layer. Line them at the seam line, so you can see there's a little bit left over there, and if you look at it this way also, but at the 1/2 inch seam allowance the raw edges are meeting up. Just a straight stitch, and always being careful to be very accurate with the seam allowance on these little seams. It makes a huge difference. The seam allowances are off. Pattern pieces might not match the neckline. Even though this looks off, it is correct. When you open it up, the raw edges match there. And now I have these non-interfaced ones, and I'll do the exact same thing. Just sew them carefully. We will need to head over to the iron soon. It's shaped like this on the outer edge. We need to do a guide stitch at 1/2 inch all the way around, and then head over to the iron and press that in towards the wrong side so it's ready to work with later. This is the non-interfaced neckband, and I have already pressed the wrong side in. You can see that you have quite a lot of pockets there and excess because the seam allowance is so large, but because the fabric is lightweight, I'm just going to try and ignore that. If I had a heavier fabric like linen or some stiffer cotton, I would definitely be trimming that seam allowance a little smaller so I wouldn't get that bulk, but with this one you can't really tell. At this point I'm not going to touch it, and I'm going to take my interface side and put it on top. They should be the same size, and then we're going to pin the inner edge here, both of them together, and sew them together. All pinned. I've matched these seams, and I'll just be careful to be super accurate with the seam allowance also. I'm definitely going to trim down the seam allowance. I think that's just too big to leave in there. After I've trimmed it, cutting it in half, so I just have about 1/4 left. Then we need to snip all around this curve. Quite a lot of snips actually, quite close together because the whole shape is very curved. After snipping, then we understitch. So I'm going to make a snip every 3/8 of an inch or so because it's curved everywhere. There's no place here where it's sort of straight. I'm going to look at it like this now, where we have the non-interface side on top. This is the one that's going to be inside, and this is the direction that we want to understitch. right there. So the seam allowance we press towards the non-interfaced neckband. I don't want to understitch from the very edge because that will interfere with closing this up later. So I'm going to start a little beyond, maybe 3/4 of an inch further from the edge, and the same as on this other side, I'm going to stop before I get to the edge. I don't want to go all the way in there. So I'll just put a pin to remind me to stop there. Again, I've got my blind hem presser foot with the needle to the left. On my left hand, I'm touching the non-interface neckband, and on the right hand, I have the interface. This is how it's going to look on the inside, very neat, and then on the outside you just have a really clean edge with none of the inner neckband showing. Little interruption during the sewing. If you are enjoying all this content and it's really helping you with your sewing, consider subscribing. Tap on that bell so you get notified when I upload content. Pretty frequently. I do post a lot. Now let's get back into the sewing. We have the neckband all assembled separately, and now it's time to unite that neckband onto the neckline. All together, gathers. All that's happening now. Here we have the top part of the blouse. This is the center front there. I've marked it with a pin. This is a seam here. In there we have dots that match these seams. The dots are just on the edge of the seams there. And then we have this neckband piece. Now on the front neckband piece, you'll find the dot there. You'll find the dot there. I've marked it with pins. And then on the back neckband piece, there's also a dot there. You can see that it doesn't match this seam. This seam is actually going to be sort of where the raglan sleeve is. So let's just pin the center front first with the center front of the blouse, right sides together. We're pinning the neckband that is interfaced, the one that has a regular raw edge here, so that'll match right there. Now this dot that we have on this neckband is going to match this next seam right here, so we'll pin it there. We still haven't gathered, but we first need to match all these reference points. Then on this back neckband you have that dot, and that is going to match this other seam from the sleeve right there. And now on the back piece we don't have gathering on the neckline, so this is going to match, and we're going to have 1/2 inch protruding here, and that is going to allow us to close this. So that curve is going to match. There we have a notch that is going to match the edge there of the button placket, and you can see it matches perfectly. You can see the excess that we have there that is going to be gathered into there. I'm going to go ahead and pin the other reference points, that dot of the neckband to this raglan seam here, the dot here on the back neckband to the next raglan seam, and then we can pin this right there. I think this is possibly the fiddliest part of the blouse. Not that it's hard, it's just a lot of fiddling because everything is curved. Here we have the top of the raglan sleeve there where we have the gathering. We need to pull these threads now together and match this section, and then we need to gather this section of the neckline, this section of the neckline, and then this right here. So I'm going to turn this the other way so I can see much better. I'm going to have the neckband towards the back and the excess here on the front, and I'm going to start pulling my threads until the length matches. That's one done there. And then this neckline, I always like doing it in half, so I gather from here to the center and then from this side to the center. I think it's just easier to manage than trying to do it all. I'm going to fiddle with these, try to get them as even as I can, and then pin it. Okay, in this first area that doesn't have the gathers, which is just the back area, I have hand basted that, so I don't need to worry about pins. So I've done that on this side and on this side, but all the rest, that includes the raglan sleeves and the neckline, I have kept a bunch of pins. I've never actually like to hand baste on top of gathers. I still like to have the freedom to be manually controlling it a little bit. So I'll be pulling all the pins out as I go. Just be careful and concentrate with the correct seam allowance. Make sure you're checking that your seam allowances are going towards the sleeve. So in this case, this way and that way right there. This little section is the top of the raglan sleeve right now. And underneath we have our neckband, and you have a seam in there. That seam is not going to match anything here, just gathers. You can see that as I'm sewing, my seam is landing right in the middle of the two gathering stitches, which I find is easier. This is how it looks on the right side. Now the seam allowance needs to go up towards the interface neckband, and then this will go and cover it from the inside like this, but it's just too much bulk. It's just too much, so I'm just gonna go and cut some away, and I like doing it with the gathers on top just in case. I don't want to cut anything extra. If you look at the instructions before sewing the neckband onto the neckline, the instructions had you snip into the back neckline first. I'd rather do it after I've sewn it. You know, it's just personal preference. So at this stage, I'm going to cut into this curve right here. It is quite curved. That's how it looks on this side. So we do need to snip into it. Now I'm going to go to the iron and press all of this up. This is how this is looking. This is towards the inside of the garment. So what we need to do now with this is fold it like this, right sides together. That's why I wanted this area free of understitching. You can see the understitching starts a little further. And now we just fold these onto each other, meet these folded edges there at the bottom. And now we just need to sew that flush against this right there, and then we can flip it. I'm going to trim a tiny little bit away here. And now we can fold the seam allowance onto itself here on this corner. Hold it there and flip it. You can see the understitching starts a little bit on there, and that gives us a clean edge to finish this. Keeping that seam allowance up, we're just going to cover this and tidy it up. At this point, the instructions tell us to baste. For me, basting equals hand because I have a good control of what I do. I want this folded edge to cover the seam by a tiny amount, because then we're going to sew and stitch in the ditch from the right side, and we want to be catching this right there. Okay, this took a while. This is the inside of the blouse. You can see that I've got the folded edge. I've got it covering the seam a little bit, and I've done here something that I know is going to take me a while to remove later, but I've done my basting stitches right in the ditch where I'm going to sew, and that's to ensure that where I'm going to sew, I'm catching it right on the edge. So that's how it looks on the right side. Everywhere I'm going to sew in the ditch, it's all hand basted, and then it's catching it on that side. So I'm going to use my regular presser foot, and I'm just going to go slow. I have actually used this stitch in the ditch foot before, but I don't like it that much. I just have a hard time actually seeing what I'm doing. Stitch in the ditch and just see what I'm doing while I sew, and it does work really well. I can still get the needle right into the seam there, and I'm sewing very, very slow right here. If you look at this side, you can see that I'm catching everything right there. There's nothing that's not being caught. It's because of the way I hand basted. This in real time took about 6.5 minutes to sew, but everything's been sewn. My stitch in the ditch is actually in the ditch. You can't see the seam, although I did it with the regular presser foot. I find it more easy to manage, and I can actually see where the needle is going in on every single stitch. Now I'll just take my time and remove these basting stitches. I think many of them will be caught in the seams, so I'll just be careful. Okay, this hasn't had the final press or anything, but it's looking really nice. This is the right side of the blouse, the back. Maybe you can see the little red fruits behind me. Look at this. This is called an acerola, and it makes this amazing acidy type juice full of vitamin C. Here is my first Galicia blouse. It's so nice. This is a rayon linen blend, but it's a type that has more rayon than linen. The amount of linen in here is minimal, which gives it a really nice look, but all the drape and flowiness of the rayon. Here is the rounded neckband as it's called in the pattern. 2 layers. The outer one you see there is the interfaced one, and then you have the raglan seams right there, gathers here on the top of the raglan sleeve and along the front neckline. Another sleeve, and at the back neckline doesn't have gathers. This is meant to be functional. There are 7 buttons originally. I put 8 because I made my top a little longer, and I just found these golden buttons I thought would look nice. Now, because this is a solid and I thought you would see the buttonholes, I did them as a decorative feature. So behind the button you will actually see a full-blown buttonhole made, but I never cut into them. I just sewed the button right through, so it looks pretty realistic. The button placket I think is decorative. You can perfectly put your top on through the top. This is wide enough to fit your head, so I don't even think the first button should be functional. For most of you maybe, or maybe you want to make them functional, but that is what I did with mine. I have the long sleeve option. You can make it 3/4 also, and here is my cuff. With this one I also sewed the buttonhole, but only sewed the button through it. I didn't open the buttonhole because I can get my wrist into there, no drama. I don't need to open it for function. So that's a little bit cheeky from my part with buttonholes. I did them, but I just didn't cut into them. This fabric is so delicate, you know, it could fray. I'm protecting my garment down the line, you know. Down here, you might not be able to see them. There are optional waist studs that I decided to sew. I have 2 here on the front, 2 here on the back. That's are meant to help you fit your clothes better. They don't add to the design as such, but they do add in the way that it makes the clothes fit better, you know what I mean? In this solid you can barely see them. I wanted to make sure they were correctly placed and were going to fit me really well before I sewed them on. Definitely I did that by hand basting first. Here we can see the hem. It's been folded in twice very neatly. There you can see a little bit of my dart from the inside. Now this is all green. I won't show you this one on the inside because you won't see anything, but it's all very neat or serged. I did regular seams and finished the edges with the overlocker. No fancy French seams or anything like that because this fabric is sort of medium weight. I think it would have been bulky, especially under the arm where the seam is continuous. So you have this seam, sort of like when you sew knits, this seam and the side seam is just one continuous seam, which for this design, which is nice and loose at the bust and under the arm, doesn't bother me at all. It's not uncomfortable. So I just sewed it like it said in the instructions, you know. I paired it with my Castle Point skirt from the So Beautiful book, one that was written by Kenneth Swan, the designer of Itch to Stitch. I think that skirt goes with everything. A pair of golden heels too. If you've been watching my content and see the way I style, you know I like those types of shoes. You just slide your foot in there with a nice block heel. I'd wanted a golden pair like that for ages. Leather, so nice. I got them in Chile this summer. Very special shoes. I'm glad I was able to use them. Let's see. This is my first Galicia top from Itch to Stitch. Mine is a size 14 with a C-cup, blended to a 16 hip. The gathers on the neckline from far away, you can't see them that much. There's also a round neckband that's super pretty, and there is a button placket on the back. This is a green rayon linen blend that is perfect for this style. Up closer you can see that the Galicia blouse has waist darts front and back. They are optional, but I love them because they just make it fit so much better, so why not? This is a long sleeve. You can also make it 3/4 and it's gathered into the cuff. There you can see the vent with the lap binding that is always so beautiful to look at and so fun to sew. There's also one button there and the hem is folded up twice very neatly. The neckline up closer is so pretty. The gathers are so delicate all along the raglan sleeves and the front neckline. The back does not have gathers and it's so pretty. I'm just showing you the prettiest details up closer so you can really appreciate them. Such a satisfying make. It fits amazing, different to any style I've sewn recently, and this fabric is so gorgeous to wear, as well as this color, a solid on me, hard to see, but I enjoyed this one. I love this green. I was getting attacked by mosquitoes when I showed you my blouse outside, and I forgot to show you the vent. And it's super pretty. I always love this. It's so delicate. I have shown you how to sew this before with other garments, so I'll leave you a link to that down below. It's always a very similar technique and it's very clean. Love it. Once you've sewn a few of these, it gets really easy, I promise you. Maybe the first one will take you the longest, but then if you start sewing these a lot, it'll be super easy. Of course, I had to make a second one. I could not just not make one because I love the style, so why shouldn't I make it twice? And I had this print that I mentioned was just precious. I only had 1 meter and I was able to lay my pattern pieces on top there. I always knew I wanted to do some hacks to simplify this. I wanted to get rid of the button placket and just cut the back on the fold. Totally doable. Also, the neckband had 2 pieces at the back. I wanted to cut it on the fold and just have 1 piece. That was gonna save fabric, also time. My short sleeves, I tried on my green blouse and sort of measured there where I wanted it to be and marked that on the pattern, and that was my reference to cut my short sleeves. Added a new cuff. So look at this layout. I got the pieces to fit exactly into 1 meter and I'm so happy with that. And because it's a print, you're not gonna really see the button placket at the back too much, so I don't feel bad about getting rid of it. It's not a bad thing. So let's see it. This is my second Galicia blouse with hacks, simplified. I only had a few hours to make it and I had the idea in my head, so I knew I had to do some things to make it a little bit faster. I love the original design. I think this looks pretty similar. And what I've done here is I've got a short sleeve instead. Because it's short sleeves, I don't have the vent with a continuous lap that you have with the long sleeve version. You know, it is still wide there, and I was able to gather this into a cuff. I have more details about how I did this one over on my Patreon page as exclusive content, so if you are signed up there, you'll be able to see. I used the same cuff piece that the blouse has, only adapted it to be a little wider to fit this circumference right there. You know, if it was 3/4, it's a little narrower, and then if you're doing the long sleeves, it's even more narrow because your arm starts getting narrow as it gets to the wrist, right? So I just had to adapt that. And then the other big change was not have the button placket on the back. I intended to cut my back piece on the fold, but because I only had 1 meter of fabric, I wasn't able to do that. So I do have a sneaky back seam there. You can't really see it that much because of the print, but what I do have here is the back neckband cut on the fold, both the outer layer and the inner layer, so I have no overlap, no buttons, nothing, which saved a lot of the construction time. And also because this is a print, you wouldn't have been able to see it. So I love the original details for a solid because you can really see them, and it'll be worth your time doing them because everyone will be able to observe and appreciate all the work. But with a print you can't, so might as well do some hacks to simplify, right? So this is a precious fabric. I love the tones. It's so beautiful. It's got all the rest the same, all the gathers here. I also have the darts. And because this one is white on the wrong side, I'm going to show you what's inside so you can see. Oh my gosh. Okay, I just looked down and I had like 5 mosquitoes on my legs, so gotta make this short. Okay, here is the front. Here you can see the raglan sleeves, how this is gathered into the cuff. You can see the darts right there that are optional. Darts at the back, my sneaky center back seam that shouldn't be there, but is there so I could get my blouse. I really enjoyed sewing it. Let's see it with the same styling as the other one. All I did was swap the tops. This is my second Galicia top from Itch to Stitch, also size 14 with a C-cup blended to 16 at the hips. This is a precious fabric I've been hoarding for over a decade. It's a beautiful print, so I decided to simplify some of the features that weren't really going to be seen that much. The most visible one here is that I have a short sleeve instead. Otherwise it's the same lovely details, same length. Up closer you can see the darts. I have also sewn them here. Why not? It just fits so much better when they are sewn. Comfy ease at the hips here. This mystery fabric that is very lightweight with a sheen takes the gathers very well, simplified the sewing process a great deal, and we're not missing out that much. And at the back there's no button placket, it's just a simple seam at the back, and the neckband was cut on the fold instead of having that be 2 pieces. Here is a closer look at the short sleeves. They are also gathered into a cuff. I did modify the cuff from the original version though to make it a little wider to fit this area of my arm. So gorgeous. I think this is one of the most beautiful blouses I've made in a while. I was just smiling the whole way through. I was sewing it, cutting it, just so beautiful, so delicate. The colors here, the look, I just feel amazing in this style. So maybe the fact that they match and that this color is present in this print had a lot to do with the motivation for me to actually get this sewn. Just because I like this color so much and I had this fabric that had this print, I thought, yeah, now I need to make some sort of bottom that will go with it. So happy with both. They are both so cute. I mean, tell me how cute these short sleeves are. They're just so cute. So we have the original with the button placket, which is super pretty. I love it. Looks awesome on a solid. And then this one has nothing. But the fit is the same. They both have the beautiful gathers on the front. I think you can see them even though this is a print. You can still appreciate the detail on the front, which I really like. These projects, so satisfying. What can I say? If you only sew knits and you haven't sewn wovens, you are missing out, because over time you'll be able to sew things like this and you'll be so happy when you wear them. So beautiful. I mean, my husband saw this one and he said, oh, that's so elegant. I agree. I think it's a really, really classy design. And it just depends on your fabric choice, what you can do with it. Go with the fabrics that flow. That's my opinion. I think it just looks really nice. That is the end of the video. Now I just want to have a little chat. If you've noticed this, wow, right? No, not really. Don't get used to it though, because I never go to the salon. I hadn't been since the start of the pandemic. I'd been cutting my own hair and it was a hot mess. I also hadn't done my eyebrows. Anyway, I went over there, retouched my little white hairs, did all the thing. You know when they blow dry it and it looks so beautiful. With this humidity, it doesn't last. Yeah, I'm happy I was able to take some pictures and film this video for you looking a little bit more civilized. I'll be back with my curly hair in the next one. Thanks for stopping by today, and I will see you again very soon with more sewing. Bye.